Welcome to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I invite you to join me as I interview artists from a variety of disciplines. We'll share powerful stories and lessons learned while making their art. Hello, this is the Spiritual Artist Podcast, and this is Chris Miller. I am so excited today. I'm here with a return guest. Robin Hackett has been on the podcast before last year. She was sharing the source of her creative inspiration as a singer-songwriter. And Robin has beautiful lyrics and beautiful music, and I encourage you to go back to podcast 2 and listen to that podcast, and you will be inspired. But I brought her back today because she is doing something, well, I thought new, but it sounds like she's done several books before, but she's introducing a new book called The Creative You. And I have gotten the privilege of being able to look at that book before it hits the market on February 14th. And so I'm going to ask her some pointed questions about this book. So good morning, Robin.
Good morning, Chris. It's great to be here again.
It's great to have you. As I said earlier, I just love talking to you. And I love your energy. And I have to tell you, I loved your book.
Good.
Yes, it's so joyful and it's so natural. And it's definitely in a personal voice. It reads just like I was talking to you.
Yeah, it's a quick read too, just so everyone knows. It's a quick read. It's only 75 pages.
It is a quick read, but I love to go through a book and I like to mark them up. You know, I like to highlight areas that grab me and things that stand out. The first thing I want to share with our listeners is a concept in this book that might surprise them, and I wanted to ask you about it because you kind of you talk about your fairy god Muse, and you use the pronoun she. So tell me about that. What is your goal with this book? Like, why is your fairy god Muse a she?
Because I really felt like I wanted to direct the book towards women and even young girls as well. I mean, actually women of any age. So I call her she, and I don't mean to exclude men, but you guys get a lot of props in our society and a lot of lift up and a lot of go get them. And when I was young, that wasn't the case for me as a woman. It's changing now for young women. But I just like to I like to give what I possibly wasn't given when I was young. And that was that boost, that was that you can do. When I was young, there wasn't even competitive sports for women.
Huh.
So yeah, so I've geared it towards women.
So this is an issue that you think is something women should look at, their creative expression and who they are.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even call it an issue. It's just that I think creativity for me really brings lots of joy to my life, and it makes me a more joyful person, and we need more of that. And a lot of people, a lot of women have been, and I've spoken with a lot of women that have been wounded around their creativity, you know, whether it was singing or writing or whatever it was. Someone shut them down and said, oh no, don't do that. That's ridiculous. You know, you'll never succeed at it. You can't make a living at it, whatever it was. And they've shut down their own creativity.
Well, it's interesting that is an area that I highlighted. I think it might even be a chapter, but it's called, there's a section, it's called The Wound.
Yes.
The Wound.
Yeah.
And I think probably almost any creative person can relate to that. You know,
yeah.
A moment in time when you were wounded. I actually I have a favorite horror story where about being wounded. And I was in a class in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon, and it was a huge auditorium. And to make this long story short, the teacher was up on the stage and I was talking, and he singled me out and he made me get up and walk out. This was an art class that I took on Saturday mornings. And he was up on the stage and some girl behind me tapped on my shoulder, and I turned around to talk to her, and he yells, you who's talking during my teaching, get out. And So you want to talk about a wound? I actually got up, walked out of that auditorium, stood in. I had to stay in the lobby till the class ended because my brother was in there, and
Uh-huh.
I decided from then on I was not going to be an artist. I would never be an artist.
Oh my gosh. How old were you, did you say?
I was like 12, 10 or 12.
Oh
And
my gosh. I'm so sorry that
it,
happened.
it was, yes. And so I love that your book is addressing this, that I think we all have that kind of an experience. And how do we come back from it? How do we find that creative muse, the fairy god muse,
Mhm.
back?
Well, we have to. That's what my book's all about. It's about pointing you back because there's always, if you are meant, quote unquote, to be an artist or to be creative, and I hate using the word meant, but if it's still swirling around in your mind, then there's still nudges towards it, then you need to begin that walk towards it. You need to begin that journey. Whether you've never even started it or you were wounded and you shut it down, but you still hear those nudgings in your mind to create, then you have to start walking towards that. And so that's what my book is about. And the first one is about remembering, and I know many people have this, remembering a time in your childhood where there was that one thing that you could just get lost in, and identifying what that one thing is. And so, oddly enough, because I am more known as a singer-songwriter, the first thing that I did as a kid was write. I wrote little plays and little stories, and I would make my friends perform them, and I'd get my parents and have all the other neighborhood parents come, and I'd make like a makeshift curtain sheet. And I'd have all the parents, sit in lines in their lawn chairs and put on a show, and it was something that I wrote.
So what happened? How did you get directed away from that?
I guess I think I discovered that I could sing and that I could play music, and then I just ended up getting lost in that. And I also loved acting as well, but I didn't totally. Now that's something that the other thing that I've definitely shut down. And we'll see if that resurges again, even at the age that I'm at. But I shut that down at some point. But it's just that the music came in the forefront. And then there was a point where I moved to New York, and I was on the board of directors of a theater company, and we were putting on our own shows, original pieces, and I ended up writing a piece. And I remember someone who was in the company was like, "This is absolutely stunning. This is amazing." So that's when it had found its resurgence again, but not fully. But that's when I was like, "Huh, interesting." And I remember a time when I was in college, but I kind of ignored it, where I was taking a class called "I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings."
Huh.
So of course it was based on Maya Angelou's book, and the teacher gave us an assignment of writing our own poem, and I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do that? Because I wasn't a songwriter then in college, not even then. And I was like, how am I going to do that? And of course, at the last minute, when I sat down to do it, because I was afraid to do it, that it would be horrible, I wrote something that just kind of flowed out like this. And she stopped me. I don't know. I think after I was having lunch one day, and we happened to cross each other's paths. She goes, "That poem was simply just amazing." And I'm like, "Oh, well, thank you very much." She goes, I think there's there's a writer in you." And I'm like, "Eh." So yeah, so that's that. And then the way I actually really, really got back into it fully is that I was leaving New York. I had made the decision to leave New York City after 20 years. And I did it on an impulse. I was just like, it's time for me to go. I called my mom here in Texas and said, I'm going to come to Texas. She goes, really? Because I always used to say I'd never leave New York for Texas. but it was time for me to go. And on the day that I made that decision, I was kind of, once again, it's the muse that calls you. I was called to my computer and I started writing a story about a singer-songwriter who leaves New York and goes west.
Hmm.
And that's how I wrote my first fiction novel.
Well, I think in our society we do a disservice because we think we have to pick one talent. You know,
Yeah.
it,
Yes.
it's like I have to be just this one thing and everything. And I have struggled with that because I enjoy a lot of different things. I obviously enjoy writing myself because I wrote my book, and I enjoy painting.
Yes.
But from a child, I always felt like people were trying to, what is your career? What is your goal? What is your focus?
Yes. Yes.
And they try to put you into a slot, and that's all you do. And
Yeah.
we talked about in that earlier podcast that you are a beautiful lyricist. You write beautiful words, and of course you should be a writer. And I should point out to our listeners, this is your fourth book. Is that right?
Let me see. Yeah, this is my fourth book.
So you have one called "Girl, You're a Grown Ass Woman." You gotta love that title, right?
Yes, yes. And that's of course, that's a self-help book. Once again for women. Once again for women, just about creating a healthy, functional life, a spiritual life, a life of worth, a life of courage, and a life of confidence.
Wow, I love it. It sounds
All
pretty
things that we shall continually be working on. So
yeah. So and all that reverence with the title like "Girl, You're a Grown Ass."
I know.
It definitely catches your eye. And then there's two fiction here. It says, "Didn't see that coming."
Mm-hmm.
When doves fly. Tell me how the fiction is different. How is that different?
I different in what way, Chris? Because I'll just say that all my creativity is just downloaded to me. So I can't say how it's different. It's I just never thought that I would and I have to tell you that I started writing the fiction book before I did Girl, You're a Grown Ass Woman. It's just that Girl, You're a Grown Ass Woman came out first because I was writing that fiction book once I left New York City. It took me 13 years to finish that book because I was like, I'm not a writer. I'm not a fiction writer. This is ridiculous. What am I doing? And I would stop, and not just stop for 15 minutes or 2 months. I'd stop for 5 years. And then, I'd see it and I go, this is interesting. Maybe this isn't so bad. And then I would continue writing. And then one day I told a friend of mine about the book because I was kind of getting excited about it and liking it myself. And I told her about it. She goes, oh my gosh, I want to read it. I want to read it. So I sent her over, a few chapters. I probably had 12 chapters written by that point. She's like, oh my God, you have to finish this. This is amazing. So yeah, for me, it all comes gurgling out the same way. It all comes gurgling out the same way.
Well, where do you decide, like when it comes flowing through you, how do you know, oh, this is fiction and this is going to be sort of a self-help, more of a directional? Is it just the wording itself that tells you?
Yeah, it's just my muse tells me. That's all. My muse tells me, like there's a book right now percolating in me. And what I do is that, okay, if I hear it one time and I go, okay, that could be interesting. But then I hear it a second time and then a third time. And this one that's percolating now just started over the weekend because I did my first speaking engagement. And I had to come up with a talk for that, for my speaking, a talk title. I was like, oh my gosh. And I was really nervous to speak. And people have been asking me to speak for a while. And I'm like, who am I to speak? I can't do that. I need my guitar in front of me. So I incorporated music with the talk. And the talk is, called Who's Running Your Show? And Spirit downloaded this idea about there being a rowdy cast of characters running our show. Critical Chrissy, Wounded Wanda, Judy, living up here. And this is why people stop themselves from creating because they have that rowdy cast of characters up there. So on Sunday when I spoke, um, during the day after, I was like, oh, you should write a book about the rowdy cast of characters. And then I woke up yesterday and it was still there. And I woke up today and there's a little bit more information coming. So it's like, maybe you're supposed to write that book next.
That's interesting that you say that because, I just published The Spiritual Artist in December or November, and I'm starting to download the next book. But yeah. They're coming in, I get chapters, I get like, here's a concept. And then I'm like, well, how are these going to go together?
Oh, yeah. So my process is really different, especially Chris. When I wrote the first fiction novel, there was me as the main character. That was it. I didn't walk away and go, oh, I wonder who's going to be the next character. I just was like, where's this thing going? And as I went along, each time I got a nudge from my muse, I would go to my computer and start typing and go, I don't know what's going to happen next, but my muse knew what was going to happen next. And my muse added each character. It's almost like this magical thing. And some people, there are other writers that are like, no, I plotted out. I know who the characters are. I know what's going to happen. I know what the end of the book is. And I write from there to that end. Well, I don't know who the characters are. I don't know what's going to happen. And the book is called Didn't See That Coming, because it's kind of like my life in general. You don't know what's coming. You really don't know what's coming. So for me to write novels or to be a writer is like, oh, I didn't see that coming. So
that's interesting that you say that, because I was talking to my husband this morning about what should I be planning for 2021? It's New Year, and hopefully things will open up and we can go out again. And I was saying, well, I think you have to ask a specific question and listen to your muse or your intuition. And he said, well, I don't know about that. He goes, I think maybe you have to just feel your way through it.
Yes. That's the kind of writer I am. I feel my way through it. And I think, as you know, in the book, that I do consider the fairy god muse and our intuition as one in the same. And that in actuality, the fairy god muse isn't just running your creative life. The fairy god muse is really running your entire life.
Yeah, I think there's truth to that. And it was funny. I was like, well, shouldn't I? And he goes, well, sometimes if you ask a specific question, you're narrowing the answer. If I say, should I take this job or this job? You're kind of, but if you just say, what feels good? Right?
Yes.
There might be a third option that's not even what you see.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that with creativity, it's the same thing. For me, it feels wonderful to create. Once I got past all the stuff going on in my mind, the rowdy cast of characters up there telling me, oh, you're not a writer. What do you think you're doing? Da, da, da. Once I got past that and just or who would buy this? Once I got past all those things and just created because, man, it was so much fun, I would be on a high. Like, if I create, it doesn't matter how the rest of the day goes. I've set myself in a good motion, in a good direction. It's like meditating in the morning. So if I create every day, everything else can be as it is. It doesn't matter to me because I've fulfilled that. I've fulfilled that that craving, that urge, that need, that joy. So it doesn't matter what else goes on. And if I don't create, well,
Well, I think I agree with you on that. I definitely think that being in that place of creating,
yes,
it's not about finishing. I try to share that with people too. It's not about finishing at all. It's about being in the place of.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
I highlighted something in your book, one of your lines, and it says, "Thinking disturbs the flow of creativity." That's straight out of your book. Thinking.
It's a tough one. I'm sure a lot of people will look at that and go, wait a minute. Um, you have to think. I think it's a thin line, but self-directed thinking. Like there's a section in my first fiction novel where I was typing and moving this character in a certain direction, and once again the muse came and said, oh no, there should be a car accident. I'm like, no, 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 I'm not doing a car accident. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. That's me thinking. And I typed and I was like, oh, I don't really like how this is going. Da, 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 da. And the muse said, car accident, car accident. Nope, I'm not doing a car accident. That's so cliche. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. And I couldn't move this section along. And so, as I say in the book, one of the techniques that I use when there's a block is to get up and go and do something totally different. Go wash the dishes, go for a short walk, whatever it is. Even for me, I know this is going to sound so crass, but it's true. Even going to the bathroom and sitting there, and I'm like, I know what I can do now. So you're just moving your energy. You're getting out of that stuck place, and you're moving your energy, and then inevitably for me, then that block moves. But what happened with that car accident is that my muse insisted on that car accident, and as soon as I moved in the direction of that car accident and started writing about the car accident, then boom, it opened up. I mean, it was just like type, 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 type. So to me inserting what I wanted to have happen, but my muse kept going, car accident.
And you're right. It's like it's an intuition beyond thinking. You're right. It's just like, oh, I know this. This is what happens. But we do that all the time, don't we? I mean, even in the day, we're driving down the street and we hear a voice say, "Don't take that highway," right?
That's your fairy god muse.
And of course, the question is, do we listen to the voice or do we take no, I'm going to take the highway.
I do have a funny story about that.
Oh, well, tell us the story.
Well, the funny story is that my boyfriend years ago, who was also in my band, so we were a duo together, and so we were going to be on, I don't know, one of the morning TV shows here in Dallas. And the day before, he said to me, do you want me to drive or do you want to drive? And a thought came to my mind and said, you should let him drive. You should let him drive. But I instead said, oh, no, I'll drive. It'll be all fine. It'll be totally fine. Then the next morning, once again, he says to me, do you want me to drive? And I'm like, no, I think let's take my car. Let's take my car. So it was really, the question was really about whose car we were going to take. And I said, let's take my car both times. But something just kept nudging at me in regards to that. And this is going to sound crazy to people. But what happened is that we did take my car, even though that nudge was like, no, we really should take his car. We took my car. And we're driving there, and it's crazy Dallas traffic. We have to be there at like 6 a.m. or something to set up, meet the rest of the band, da 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 da. And we get a flat tire. And some people will think, oh, that doesn't mean one doesn't not connected with the other. But there was something saying
right.
to me both times, Robin, we need to take David's car, not your car. And lo and behold, we got a flat tire on the way. And I'll add to it, I've never had a flat tire. And that's the only flat tire that I've had.
Well, I think that's what I love about the creative process. And I love about your book, because your book is talking about how the process works. But creativity applies to living your life. It's the same thing.
It is the same thing. It's the same thing. And
And if the listeners get anything out of this, listening to this podcast, it's definitely listen for that little voice, listen to what it tells you, and don't fight it. For God's sakes, don't take that highway or take the other car and learn that impulse. And when you take that practice, because it's practice, right? And you mentioned that in here too. When you practice this in your life as well as in your creative process.
Yes.
it just, like you said, the book flowed from there. You created the accident, and suddenly everything flows.
Yeah, absolutely. And with this book, The Creative You, my boyfriend, I told him that I was thinking of being a creativity coach and and an influencer. That's what it's called now, not a speaker. He goes, well, if you're going to do that, you have to have a book. You have to have
Oh.
a book. And I'm like, oh, what a great idea. And so, do you think that I outlined this, Chris?
I don't know, but it has a beautiful flow. Yeah.
I did not outline it. I did not. I had no idea. But he said write a book, and I was like, I'm writing a book. This was done like within, I don't know, 20 days, 21 days. I just followed, because once again, here's the other thing that I also mentioned in the book. We are in service. We are in service as artists. Now, some people may not look at it that way. Some people may look at it as like, well, this is how I'm making money and I'm going to become rich, da da da. But we're in service.
Mm.
So when we do our creativity and we put it out into the world, we're touching lives. On some level, we're touching lives. And then it also gives other people permission to break out of their shell and perhaps go and do, their creative thing. Or it just brings people joy, and that's enough.
Yeah, that's enough.
That's enough. So I do this thing of holding back our creativity because we think we're not enough, or we're not good, da 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 da. It's like we're making a judgment about the muse. We're saying whatever the muse is telling us to do, what does the muse know? And we shut it down, and it's not ours to shut down.
Oh, interesting. And it's that spiritual flow, that the divine intelligence coming through you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's not ours to shut down. It is ours to give.
Oh, I love that. I love that the idea of giving, and I think that's why we're all unique. I do think we all have unique gifts, and your voice is so unique and like you, and the way you're going to say this creative process is different from how I will talk about the creative process, from how anyone else. And there are people out there that this just resonates with,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
I thought so. You go from 13 years to write a book to, did you say 20 days?
Yes. And when I wrote Girl, You're a Grown Ass Woman, I was still in the process of writing. So let me see. I left New York in 2003. I don't think I didn't see that coming, the first fiction book, until, I don't even know, 2015, 2016. But Girl, You're a Grown-Ass Woman, another book, it was a divine download, came through in about 36 hours.
Well, I love that, because I try to explain to people too, we tend to think of quality as time. The more time we put into something, the better it will be. And I don't think that's the truth. I think it's the more connected and in tune we are. Yeah. The more connected to spirit we are, the more we're allowing flow. You can do a masterpiece literally in a day, because
yes,
it's the intensity of that flow, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I've heard many screenplay writers that, went somewhere and hunkered down in a cabin somewhere and came out with their screenplay, 3 days later. I mean, once that flow is there, you got to follow it. And, you'll get the first draft really fast. If you're open to that, if that's how it downloads for you, it can happen that way. It doesn't have to be years and years and years, but some things can take that long.
Yeah, and it's so funny because, like I said, my first book was like a 5-year process, and now I feel like it's coming faster. I would encourage the listeners, though, when they read your book, because I know it is a quick read, but like I said, take your highlighter. I'm giving you permission. I'm giving the listeners permission. Take your highlighter and focus on the lessons that are shared in this book, because Robin is sharing some wonderful lessons, and when you highlight them, it enforces it. So here, what we're just talking about, on page 45, Creativity is not so much about thinking as it is about allowing.
Mm.
When you're brushing your teeth, drying dishes, or walking, the mental chatter we have become accustomed to, it disappears. So it's that allowing process that we're practicing, right?
Yeah, it is. That is like the hardest lesson ever, right?
Right. It is. It
That is
is.
definitely, definitely. And I do point people towards, as you know, some of the tools towards meditating and mindfulness. And I do a quick introduction to it, but I'd love to go further into that. But that's a whole nother thing. But it's like waking up and you're getting ready to create. You feel that nudge to do that, and as however process that you can do, whether it's gardening or going for a walk or doing whatever you do, to clear the canvas,
Mm-hmm.
to clear the canvas of all the chatter, all the mental chatter. Whatever way you can do that, meditate, be mindful, breathe, walk, whatever. Clear the canvas so that you can begin to create. The other day, I spoke at Dallas Meditation Center, and I said, clear the canvas so that you can use your Buddha brushes.
Mm.
Begin to create.
And
As
I think I think like when you talk about drying dishes, I think what that does for me is I'm ADHD. I'm ADHD, and my mind's always going. Well, when I have to do something like that, brush or wash dishes, because my mind is misdirected. My mind is directed on making sure I don't break that china, right?
right. Yes.
That's how I keep that chatter down and I clear the canvas. I occupy my mind with some menial task. That's why, like you were talking about, taking your shower, whatever those things, and suddenly you go, oh.
That's when it happens. Yeah. Every single time, it's guaranteed when I'm blocked or stuck or perceive that I'm blocked or stuck. If I get up and go do something else, the answer comes. The answer comes what to do next. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. Um, and I think even the idea of being stuck, maybe we're not stuck. Maybe we're just processing.
Yeah, and to not see, because when I say stuck, that's a judgment. That's
Yeah.
critical.
And I say it too. Yeah.
And you just say, I'm processing. You know, it's those word choices. What's going on? Oh, I'm processing my next book, Robin. It's processing. It's churning up in there. So I do think the word choices that we use are always valid and always important. And we've learned that.
Yeah. Yeah.
More than ever in the last 4 years, we've learned the importance of words.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Consciously choosing your words and picking them out. So there was one other thing I want to share with you. You have, I love this, is it alliteration when you use the same R sound? But you have these 7 steps. So I'm going to ask you to share those a little bit because you kind of put together some steps here.
Yes, I have put together some steps. Thank you for the reminder. And the first step is really getting into the space of remembering any point in your life where you got lost in something creative, in your choice, in your genre of creativity, where you got lost. All right. So that's really about identifying perhaps what you might want to explore again or get into, really identifying that and that thing that you got lost in. So for me, it was definitely writing when I was a kid. And it was also, I had this little organ and I used to play that organ and just make up the craziest songs and just out loud nonsense. And hours would go by. I didn't even care what was happening. There probably could have been an explosion and I would have just been like, okay. So that's you identifying possibly what it is you might want to create, which genre you want to go into. And
so if somebody, let me reaffirm that. If somebody is sitting there going, if they read your book and they go, I'm not creative, that's not true. They need to sit down and remember when they were a child, right?
Right. Yeah.
And as a child, we know what we are, I think, more clearly. Yes. And you mentioned that in your book. And so remembering, just sitting there, I remember when I was a kid, I used to go down the street, I kid you not, Cheryl Harrison. We had coloring books, and we would just sit there on the picnic table, and we would just color.
Oh, yes. How wonderful is that, though?
Yeah, and just page after page after page. And
Yeah.
so if as a listener, if you're sitting there going, I'm not creative, that's not true. You have to take the time, meditate on this, and remember, right? I love that.
Remember, absolutely remember. And it could be for you that, that your mother taught you how to crochet. I mean, it's not like that we're all going to do like these big, amazing things out in the world. It's just creating for the joy of it. And, and other people might witness it and go, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. But if you loved crocheting when you were a kid, but then you just stopped doing it, or you love cross stitching. My mom loves cross stitching. She's been doing it for years. She loves it. Absolutely. And I do make mention of her in the book.
Yes.
But yeah, it's good to let people be aware that it's not that we're all supposed to be these grand, stars or, the world renowned artists or what have you. It's just simply doing what you're naturally inclined to do that you shut down because of thoughts, the rowdy cast of characters up here, and get back into that naturalness, that flow that is you. And that flow is joy. And as I say, I round it up towards the end of the book, that's a good reason to create, because for me, I become joyful. And then who doesn't want to be around a joyful person?
Right. And you're right. It's not about the end result at all. Mm-mm. It's about being in that state of joy as long as possible.
Yes.
As long as possible. As many hours of your day, if you can be in that place.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it helps. I'm really into this thing of service now, and it helps just, ignite a spark. And it could be one person that you meet at the grocery store or what have you. And you get in a conversation and you say, oh yeah, I'm a writer. Oh my gosh, you write? Oh, I've always wanted to do that, but I'm just down. And I've had many conversations like that. And I'm just like, you just have to do it. You just have to show up and start doing it. Allow that to happen.
Yeah, I love that. You don't ignore that in the book. You're talking about flowing and listening, but you also say that you have to show up. You have to say, I'm committed to this.
Yeah, you have to. Absolutely. Then there's release.
Uh-huh.
And release is the idea of that we have to release wherever we got wounded. We have to release the story of, for me, it was, a brother and sister right before I was getting ready to go sing on stage. And I was the soloist for this group that I was in. It was 100 teenagers. And we sang patriotic and Christian songs. And this was when I lived in Germany. And right before I was getting ready to go on stage, they said, you sing like a horse.
Oh. Oh, nice.
But I never forgot that.
Right.
And so when I sing my music, I sing on the lower end. And I thought, well, they just mean that I sing too low. Oh, I got to change that. How come I can't sing higher? Da 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 da.
Isn't that amazing? Once again, reaffirming words matter. Words are important. But you have a beautiful voice. Listeners, you got to go listen to her music. It's so beautiful. But that's funny how it stopped you, right? It held you back.
It did. In some way, it did stop me. And I just thought, well, there must be something wrong with my voice. And I'm always defensive still about it now, because some young people or student might hear me sing and they'll go, you sound like a man. And I'm like, so? Like, so what? Lots of men sound like women singing these days, and they have been since the 50s, singing way up high. But for some reason, there's not a problem with that. But if you're a woman and you sing low, you sound like a man.
From the mouths of babes, right?
What's wrong with that?
So it's about releasing that pain, and almost holding it, I would say holding it lightly, just so what? So what?
Yes, releasing. And then the opposite of that is then reclaiming. So it's almost like, saying something. Well, the story is that, someone said that I sang like a horse and da 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 da. Well, you know what? Okay, that's okay. That was their opinion. So it's like almost doing affirmations, reaffirming yourself, going past the stories and reclaiming reclaiming that little one that used to sing for hours and hours, that used to color in their book for hours and hours. And
Right.
absolutely going in and reclaiming that and just, going, yeah, this is what I want to do. You wouldn't pick up the book if you weren't interested in reclaiming your creative self. You wouldn't.
Right.
You wouldn't even notice the book. So
it's almost like this came to me while you were talking. It's like you're reclaiming your child. You're reclaiming that child.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And then reconnecting is just what processes can we go through to reconnect to that creative self, to that free flowing self? What processes can we go through? So that's where I talk about meditation. I talk about mindfulness. I talk about even if you wanted to act and you've never moved towards that, go audition for a play, go take a class somewhere, go take an art class, go take a photography class, take singing lessons, whatever. Reconnect yourself. And in the midst of all that as well is, the things that we talked about, meditation and the mindfulness, preparing yourself, getting yourself ready to what? The next step, receive.
Right.
And that means showing up as much as possible. And that showing up could be in the form of going to that class or reading plays every day or reading about artists or reading lyrics, whatever it is for you, or reading literature. It's going to help you reconnect. You have to show up. And that's how you're going to receive, is by showing up and just immersing yourself in the arts, whatever that is.
Well, it's interesting because we talk about receive. I think life is, there's this creative power, and I think that it delivers to us what we're looking for. I mean, it's funny. It's that synchronicity, right? And so you talk about when you receive, it's just looking for it.
Yes.
It's suddenly, if you're hot on, if it's so funny, if suddenly I'm looking at fuchsia, I start noticing fuchsia, and suddenly everything fuchsia is coming at me, right? And books about fuchsia and the history of fuchsia and where the color was used,
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think your muse, your fairy muse there, fairy god muse, is that right?
It's fairy god muse, which we need to really tell people the concept of that is the fairy god muse is just that voice that's always been urging you to create, that voice that you listened to freely when you were a kid. And then when you were wounded, then you stopped listening to her and kind of knocked her aside. But she's been waiting there. She's always there, ready to serve you.
Oh, I love that definition, Robin. I love that definition. So wonderful. So so you got receive.
Yes.
Okay.
And then after that, once you get in that space of creativity and you just start going and you do whatever you're doing, please rejoice in what you've created. Please rejoice in that. And I don't mean do that anyway. Hey, everyone, look what I did. Sometimes I do that, but because we're like, look what I did. Look what I did. But yes, don't criticize it. Don't criticize it and then hold it back. I do an example in the book where I did my very first CD. And I don't know if you read that.
Oh, yeah, I did.
Very first CD. I listened to it. It was packaged already, and I was like, this is not good. No, this is not good. And I put it up on a shelf, literally. And a friend was over at I was moving into a new place, and I had set my place up. It was putting like books up and stuff. And my friend was helping me, and she goes, what's this? And I go, oh, this is just some CD that I did, but I don't think it's really good. And so she put it in, and she was like, are you kidding? What is wrong with you? And a friend of mine, but this is the fairy god muse putting the connections together. I worked in television at that time, and I had a friend that wanted to do like a radio show, a music radio show. And he was asking people at work, hey, anybody, play music or da-da-da. And I said, well, I do. He goes, oh, let's see what this is like. And so I gave him the CD, and he totally just freaked out by it. And at that time, this is years ago, it's when there wasn't even digital music until that year. and this site came up called mp3.com. It was the very first digital website ever. And he said, "Do you mind if I put your music up there?" And I was like, "No, I don't mind." So he put my music up there, and they had a whole charting system. If people downloaded the music, you got paid. I made a living. I made like $700 a month off of
That's amazing. That is amazing.
off of that CD going up. And on top of that, I had record labels contacting me. Of course, I didn't get signed, but just the fact that record labels were contacting me. And then at the end of each year, they would have like the director of the jazz department, the director of folk music, the director of country music, and those directors would nominate certain people, their songs, to be the winner in that genre. And I was the winner in 3 genres. I charted straight across, and I was like, wow. And people voted for me to be the winner in my genres. And I charted on the billboard.com website online, and it was an amazing experience. But had I not listened to my friend, and our muses can come in many shapes and sizes. They can be in our head, but they can be in the form of people. Had I not listened to her and to my other friend who put it up, then I wouldn't have reaped those benefits of that.
Yeah, it talks about, just when I was talking about synchronicity, your fairy god muse brings you those opportunities. But if you put it in the closet, if you hide your CD in the closet, right?
Yes, and so that's what I mean about rejoicing. Rejoicing means really just to share it out in the world and allow other people the opportunity to rejoice and experience it and love it.
Right. Right.
Don't deny them that. So
I love it. I love it.
That's
Definitely.
what that is. And then the very last, the very last step is to repeat. And I got that from Marian. I can't ever say her name.
Wait.
The prosperity woman, Marian Morrissey, Mary Manon Morrissey.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's repeat. You will have to go back through the steps over and over and over and over. And how great is that?
Yeah, that's great. And you just keep in every aspect of your life, not just creativity, but our whole lives are creative, and
Yeah.
you just keep repeating that process and refining it and listening to that flow, like you talked about.
Yes. Yeah. And then the very last chapter that I wrote was Loving the Journey. And that's kind of a dedication to my mom, because that's where I learned my creativity. Except for when I was a girl, I would compare, like she was trying to show me how to sew, how she was always doing something creative, how to do crafts, how to crochet, cross stitch, da 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 da. And I was always in a hurry to get whatever it was done. And I could never do it right, and I would end up frustrated and da da da. But my mom was great at it. And she, to this day, she's just, when she does it, she's just very peaceful. She doesn't sell her stuff. I used to say to her, why don't we, go to a Christmas bazaar and sell it? Oh, no, I don't want to do that. She does it for her own joy. And we as a family get to experience what she does, because she puts her cross stitch up on there's cross stitch everywhere in our house to this day. And it's beautiful. She does it for every season. St. Patrick's Day, Valentine's Day is coming up, so there's going to be cross stitches. There's going to be little hearts that she's made that say love or something on it. Then for St. Patrick's Day, the same thing. Then it goes on to, July 4th. She does every single holiday and every season. It's really beautiful. But I had to realize, that whatever her talents were and gifts were, that wasn't necessarily mine. And then it took me, a while to discover what my talents were and to stop comparing myself. And so loving the journey, I mean, it's an amazing thing. It's a great gift to be able to create.
Oh, it is. It is.
And it really has made me a much happier person once I embraced it. Once I embraced that first fiction book, it's kind of cool now. So I don't want to be without creativity. I don't want to be without my fairy god muse, my constant companion. So yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful. I always love talking to you, as you know.
I know. We have a great time.
And so I love the cover of your book. It's very impactful. It's two faces. Is that correct? Two faces.
It's two faces. Yeah. Oh, it doesn't matter if you see it because no one else is really going to.
But it's very eye-catching, and it's going to be released you have it on Amazon, right?
Well, I already. You know what, Chris? It's already released. I already put it out there.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
So people, once they hear this, immediately go on Amazon and purchase it.
Yes, for The Creative You by Robin Hackett. And if you don't go to you can also go to my website, www.robinhackettmusic.com, and just check out other things that I'm doing as well, too.
Oh, well, I encourage people to do that because, like I said, I would be that person pulling a CD off your shelf and saying, "What is this? I want to hear it." After I first met you and heard some of your music, I immediately just started listening to all your stuff, and it's on not Pandora, it's on Spotify, right? You have a
it is. It's on Pandora, Spotify, iTunes. I mean, yeah.
So that's a whole nother topic, but people listen to that as well.
Whole other topic.
I mean, for the voice of a horse, it sounds really beautiful, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
You tell them. Well, thank you for being on the Spiritual Artist Podcast. I love talking to you. I love the process. I encourage the listeners to go out and purchase your book.
And I'll just say to the listeners that Chris has inspired me in many ways. There's a little dedication to him in my book. So we have great conversations. And so I'm inspired to do some kind of cast, but mine might be a more of a vlog cast than a podcast. So be waiting for that and waiting to see me with Chris, interviewing Chris about the spiritual artist.
Oh, I can be on camera.
Yeah, you're going to be on camera.
I must have some wound there that I have to get past, probably.
Yeah, maybe? You need to drop that now. That's part of the rowdy cast of characters living in your mind.
Yeah, they're very rowdy.
They can be very rowdy, right?
All right. Okay, well, I will talk to you soon and appreciate everything you are.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're following the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, make sure you choose the subscribe button so you'll receive new segments when they're released. Plus, check out my new book, The Spiritual Artist, now available on Amazon.com. In the meantime, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.